Lastly, a big thank you to MSI for making it possible for Tim and myself to attend Computex 2019. Please check out their latest AMD X570 motherboards made for gamers and creators via the link in the video description. Also, a thank you to Corsair for their support. Please check all their exciting products out via the link in the video description. Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed for the May Q&A, which we're doing from Computex. So it's going to be a little more casual than usual, though the Q&A segments are
it's always casual.
Pretty casual, but we're just doing this from a hotel room. So hopefully the audio is fine. Hopefully the lighting's okay. You're not really here to look at us. It's more about hearing our answers to some of your questions. So we should probably get into those and start answering them. What do you reckon, Tim?
Yep, sounds good to me.
Cool. First question. The thing that got you most excited about for Computex this year, what was the most exciting thing? And it's not even the most exciting product. What was the most exciting thing at Computex for you, Tim?
Well, it has to be the Zen 2 CPU announcement. Surely that was the most exciting thing.
Yeah. So basically that was even before Computex kicked off. We're all pretty interested to see what AMD had to say. There was some talks that it might just be like a chipset announcement and then some like further teasers for the Zen 2 stuff and NAVI. That would have really sucked. I would have been massively let down because I was expecting them to do pretty much what they did. I was hoping for that anyway, so that was great to see. So yeah, that was probably the most exciting thing. It's always exciting to hit the showroom floor and run around. There's no real one product that stuck out, like seeing all the full range of X570 motherboards from ASUS, MSI, Gigabyte, ASRock, all those guys. That was a lot of fun. There's always cool cases, coolers, monitors, power supplies, pretty much everything. So yeah,
I'd agree.
Cool. Okay, next one here. Can you send Tim to the gym? He's a bit small to lift those large monitors safely. Yeah, don't go underestimating Tim. He's a mighty little unit. But you can move those big monitor boxes okay, don't you?
Oh, super easy. Yeah,
throws them around.
Especially after all this Computex work with carrying the camera around. I think I'm doing all right.
It's quite funny to the showroom floor. Tim's been carrying his big camera rig and it's got a gimbal and everything on it. It weighs, and your camera alone and your lens weighs twice as much as mine. So it's quite funny. I've got my little GH5 with my little lens on it, and then Tim's got this huge heavy rig that he has to lug around while I just cruise around quite comfortably. So he's been getting plenty of workouts here at Computex. Just a quick one here. I'll address this because I've already covered this in my initial 3rd gen Ryzen video, my announcement video. Any guess about pricing for the 3600 and 3600X? So they're the Ryzen 5 processors that weren't mentioned in the live stream, oddly, but then were sort of revealed afterwards and put on their website. So the pricing for the 3600 is $200 US and the 3600X is $250 US. So that information was included in my video covering the keynote, but there you have it. Do you think we'll get 16 core on AM4 this year? Will it be a response to something Intel manages to pull out? So tell us, Tim, what's going to happen?
Oh, because I'm some oracle, am I?
He's got his crystal ball out.
Well, first of all, let's preface this by saying we don't know. We don't know what AMD's plans are for 16-core CPUs, so all of what I'm about to say is a guess.
Yep.
So let's just say that. So when you sort of look at the lineup and what AMD's done in terms of positioning, announcing, and sort of their naming scheme, giving the 12-core part Ryzen 9 3900X branding, it seems unlikely that they would push a 16-core part into that lineup for this generation. It would make sense for AMD to sort of keep that 16-core part for a future generation, say your Ryzen 4000 series, simply because let's just say that it's a situation like with Zen to Zen Plus, and we get Zen 2 to Zen 2 Plus, or Zen 3 ends up just being basically Zen 2 Plus. Then AMD might only be left with a few percent IPC improvements. They might be able to get a few hundred megahertz out of, in terms of clocking it higher, like they were able to with Ryzen 2000. So then what else exciting stuff could they possibly give? And one obvious option there is to give you a 16-core then, because they can go, oh yeah, we've got a little bit of IPC, a little bit of clock speed, but wait, we've also got a new 16-core part that we're introducing. And that would sort of, bring a lot of hype to that next generation by keeping that in the bag for next year. So if I had to guess, that's probably what they'll end up doing. I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised, but it would be a little strange for AMD to have like a 3950X or something as the 16-core part, because like those two parts would be pretty similarly named,
but very different in core count.
Yeah, and very squashed up the top end. You'd think if they were planning a 16-core for this generation, that they would maybe have pushed all the products down, like they'd have instead of a 3700X and 3800X, having a 3700 and 3700X, and then the 12-core could be the 3800X, leaving that 3900X slot for sort of your 16-core part.
Yeah.
So when you sort of look at all those things, it does point more towards, AMD waiting for the next gen to release that CPU. Obviously, there's been all those leaks for engineering samples that sort of say that, it's possible to have that chip, and I'm sure they've got them working, but that isn't necessarily an indication that it's coming now.
Yeah, I think that's where a bit of confusion comes into it, because when we say we don't think there's a 16-core part coming now, people get up in arms and say, but there is a 16-core part. How are you not aware of this? And they can clearly do one. Well, yep, we get they can do one. It's just, does it make sense to do one now? And yeah, it's really all about market conditions, which is what Tim and I have been saying since, I don't know, these rumors surfaced.
Yeah.
They'll have it in their back pocket. If they need to use it sooner than they would like to, they will. Otherwise, yeah, it might be something they save for the what would it be? The Zen 2 Plus series, I think we were talking about before.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it could, again, depend on, say, Intel might do something crazy at the end of the year. I can't see that personally happening.
No, me neither.
But let's say they come out with some ridiculous CPU on their mainstream desktop line, and then AMD could respond with a 16-core. So from a strategy perspective for them, it makes a lot of sense to keep that in the bag as opposed to just blasting everything out right now.
Yeah, and again, as we said, it's what the market is shaping up to be, and Intel pushing out a 10-core part, we expect them to do that, don't we?
I think, probably.
Probably, and it's going to be another 14nm plus type deal. I think for a lot of workloads, it'll end up being slower than the 9900K. So, but it's not going to rival a 12-core Zen 2 part, so it doesn't really put AMD in a position where they have to push the 16-core out, because Intel's gone and tacked on another 2 cores to the 9900K.
Yeah. I think I'd be fairly confident in saying that if there is a 16-core part for this Ryzen 3000 series, that we'll definitely see it after Threadripper, because it would make the most sense for AMD to produce, say, a 16-core part with Zen 2 capabilities on Threadripper first to sort of establish that lineup up to 32 cores or whatever they end up doing there. And then later they can introduce 16-core to the mainstream. Because if they introduce 16-core now and then release afterwards a 16-core Threadripper CPU, they've kind of... It would be useful for some people, but that CPU is kind of going out to die. So, I think that's probably my thoughts on this whole 16-core thing.
Yeah, fully agree with everything you said there.
I was wondering if you guys could simulate the RX 5700 by overclocking Vega 64 liquid-cooled to the limit if needed and making it 10% faster than the RTX 2070 in Strange Brigade, and then test the Vega in other games and compare it to other video cards.
Okay, I sort of see where you're going with that one. And it would probably give you a rough idea, but it wouldn't really be accurate. It's a whole new architecture. I mean, obviously it'll lend... Actually, no, it's meant to be designed from the ground up, like Zen was. So,
is it?
Yeah, it's meant to be a whole new architecture. So,
okay.
Yeah, GCN's compute heavy. Well, they said in the keynote where they've done the same thing they did with Ryzen, where Ryzen, they just use clean slate, and so that's what RDNA is meant to be.
Okay.
How true that is, I don't know. We haven't seen it, we don't know. But basically, you can't really simulate a different architecture. So we could simulate the Ryzen 5 processors with the Ryzen 7 processors, because you just disable a few cores. It's the same architecture, it's the same CPU. That's essentially what AMD is doing anyway, so you can accurately simulate that. You just have to try and roughly match the clock speeds. But when we're talking about a completely different architecture that has improved efficiency, and who knows what else, we haven't seen it yet. We haven't really seen any solid specifications. It might give you a rough idea, but yeah, it's kind of... Well, I guess you could look at it simulating Turing performance with a Pascal GPU. It doesn't really work. So,
yeah.
Next question here. Do you think the new AMD Ryzen CPU 3700X will come with a box cooler? What do you reckon, Tim?
Well, I actually looked this up right before we're answering the question because I wanted to know whether AMD released the information. It turns out Well, they have.
I thought they had.
The Ryzen 7 and Ryzen 9 CPUs, so that's your 8 cores and your 12 core processors, they all come with the Wraith Prism, apparently, according to AMD's website.
It's a good cooler.
And then for the Ryzen 5 CPUs, it's, I believe, the 3600X. That's the higher clocked model. That comes with the Wraith Spire, and then the lower clocked model comes with the Wraith Stealth. So I believe that's the 3600.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's the cooler situation with the Ryzen 3000 series as far as the chips that they've released so far. So, yeah.
Next question. Could you do a collab with Jared from Jared's Tech? That would be really exciting to watch. Yeah, we can probably do that, actually. If we were to do that, it'd probably look something like this. G'day, Jared. Would you like to do a collab?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, all right, we'll make that happen.
Cool.
All right, I've got Tim back. I'm collabing with Tim now.
Yep.
Will you be doing testing with the mitigations enabled when you start benchmarking for Ryzen 3000? So I'm assuming they're talking about the Intel vulnerabilities. So zombie load, for example. We basically test with the latest security stuff enabled. So only if it's enabled by default, though. So we won't go and enable them to deliberately cripple Intel if that stuff hasn't been enabled yet for whatever reason. Maybe there's things they've still got to sort out. So we'll test with the latest version of Windows and the latest motherboard BIOS update. So whatever that enables, that's how we'll test. I'll obviously let you guys know if it does enable certain mitigations if it's new to what we've been testing. But the previous like Spectre and Meltdown stuff, we've been testing with that enabled ever since it was enabled by default. So if it's not enabled by default by the time we go to test Ryzen, then so be it. I mean, guys will have their conspiracies like Intel delayed motherboard manufacturers pushing them out till after Ryzen, so Intel didn't take a hit then. If that happens, it happens. It just means I'll retest once they come out. I mean, there's nothing else I can do about it, really. I can't go and apply them if they never get rolled out in the way that we think they're going to. So that's that one.
More questions coming up here. This one's on NAVI. NAVI seems to have some unexpected things such as the RDNA and such. But with them comparing to a 2070, is there any hope NAVI having better than 2080/1080 Ti level card? In other words, a cheaper and or better than Vega 7, not implying Vega is better than 2080.
Yeah, I don't know. What do I say? First of all, we've got to test it to see where we're at. But I like the direction that AMD is taking with the RDNA architecture, separating that from their compute-heavy products. I think that's definitely something they've needed to do for a long time. I think it's, definitely a step in the right direction. What it means for this first release, hard to say. We'll test it and see. I'm not going to jump to any conclusions after we see the performance. I think they're taking things in the right direction, and I think down the track it will be massively beneficial. So I think it's a way for AMD to make a comeback. Got anything to add to that, Tim?
No.
Tim doesn't want to touch that one. All right. Okay, next question. What's been the most wow item you've seen at Computex so far that's not a motherboard, case, or AMD? Any hidden gems? Well, I'm gonna since I read that question, I'm gonna pass that off to Tim so I can have a quick think about what I would say.
Okay, well, I was just quickly thinking because I was like, I bet Steve's gonna pass this one off.
Yeah, think quicker.
Look, I mean, as a monitor kind of guy, you know, that's not included in that list of things.
That's true.
So I can mention...
There's a loophole for you.
Know, how good is that? I can mention the Asus Mini LED monitor. I think it's probably not the most exciting product for a lot of people, but to get better HDR support, even though it's going to be really ridiculously expensive again, just excites me because HDR has been great on TVs, and to have more monitors that can do it well is something that I look out for. And probably as well, I'm not sure what you're going to say, but if you do say this, then I've stolen it from you. The Noctua passive cooler.
I was going to say that, but it's all right. I'll think of something else.
Yeah, so that which we haven't really covered on the channel too much, but the ability to passively cool a 9900K with this big beast thing, that was pretty cool. That
was, no pun intended. Okay, well, storage. We've been talking about like the storage. The Gigabyte Aorus had their M.2 quad expansion card that you can RAID with. In a RAID 0, it does like 15 gigabytes per second. That's kind of on my wish list now. So that was really exciting, and it was also a bit of a hidden gem. I didn't expect to see that coming. So that was really cool. It's also an awesome feature of the X570 platform because that's what you need to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw a lot of good cases. I'm also back to Noctua. Also, their D15 successor that looked pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, knowing Noctua, that'll probably take a fair while to come out, but
yeah, they're working on it.
Yeah, certainly very cool. I also quite liked. Now I know this is probably controversial, but the Team Group RGB SSD, as ridiculous as RGB SSDs are, if you're getting one, that one looks by far the best of any on the market.
I agree. The wow factor with that thing's pretty incredible. It's an old rinky-dinky SATA SSD, but it does look impressive.
Yeah,
so,
it's kind of one of those aesthetics things. Like they had the liquid-cooled M.2 drive as well, which is like, what's that going to provide cooling-wise? But at least for builds, and you want to make a cool-looking build.
It's for show builds.
Products. Yeah, it's for show.
Show builds for sure. You triggered another thought with me of liquid cooling. I really liked Corsair's Hydro X range. So the GPU blocks in them looked really cool. All the connectors and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty keen to. I think a kit's been sent my way, so might better play around with that. And their CPU blocks looked good as well. So yeah, some cool stuff there from Corsair. There's probably a whole heap of other things, but that's all that's coming to mind right now. We'll move on to the next question. All right, another question here from our good mate Sal Kagan in our Discord chat. Are Intel's performance claims as nonsense as they seem on the surface? So I'll let you start with this one, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked a lot about the Intel announcements at the show because it's kind of more, at least at this stage, a laptop type thing. You're sort of looking at Ice Lake or whatever they're calling it. So I guess the main things that people are concerned about is looking at the slides that they provided about the IPC improvements. I think Intel was quoting up to 18% for Ice or Sunny Cove compared to Skylake.
That came out of nowhere.
So that was kind of like, that's a bit interesting. But I think what Sal's referring to is it looked like in the fine print of that slide that Intel weren't running the security patches that are required for the latest Skylake processors. So, I believe that would include not just the latest stuff, but also the previous Meltdown Spectre patches, and that they weren't running any of that to get those gains.
So were they running the security patches? I mean, obviously we don't know all the fine details, and Tim and I haven't really covered this too closely, as Tim said, but were they running those security patches on the older system they were comparing it to?
I'm not sure.
So it's not clear, because we've seen there's quite a substantial performance difference between that. So if all systems were tested in the same way, that still doesn't mean too much. It's still sort of an apples to apples test. But yeah, it's a bit funny that they would specify that they're not using the current mitigations. That's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I found that weird as well.
Very weird.
The other thing that I found slightly strange was sort of, they had this chart that showed the performance of the laptop CPUs of Skylake through to Kaby Lake Refresh through to Whiskey Lake through to their latest generation stuff on 10 nanometers. And the performance difference between Whiskey Lake and the new Ice Lake parts in their charts wasn't that large, and it certainly wasn't 18%. So I guess the initial thing is that obviously the clock speeds look like they're going to be lower with the new Ice Lake parts.
Okay.
It looks like we're going down from, say, your mid 4 gigahertz to below 4 gigahertz for the maximum turbo frequency, which might have something to do with that. We'll have to maybe put up that chart on the screen or something, because I wasn't sure whether it was entire CPU performance or just single threaded or just IPC.
Yeah, because IPC doesn't really, if you're changing the clock speed, anyway.
Yeah, but that chart looked not as impressive as that 18% gain, because I guess, if you increase the IPC, then you downclock it, then you're really not going to be getting much. So
yeah, this is possibly something we'll look into a bit more closely when we get back, if there's a bit of interest in that. But it seems like it's a bit of marketing silliness on that one.
Yeah, I mean, Intel's trying to make it sound impressive. They've got all these IPC gains, but if they can't clock it as high on 10 nanometers, then it's a bit of a moot point, and we're not going to get that much of a gain. Yeah. So, but again, this isn't going to apply to the desktop parts for quite some time. It doesn't sound like that CPU core architecture is going to be ready for high performance CPU. I mean, laptop parts, I guess, are high performance, but I mean like your 95 watt desktop parts for quite some time.
Sure.
So yeah, there's still a lot to play out there, but to me, like, even though those performance claims on the CPU might not sound as impressive as they look on the surface, the GPU improvements still look pretty decent. I mean, we're coming from a really terrible integrated graphics to something that is at least going on Intel's marketing slightly better than the Ryzen APUs on 10 nanometers. It's not like they're blowing everything out of the water.
No.
But for Intel, that is a big step forward. So,
if we compare Intel to Intel, I think what you're saying is it's really impressive.
Yeah, for them to Yeah. So,
but if you ignore all other current solutions, integrated solutions, probably not as impressive.
So I'll be interested to test that out and see what they've done.
All right, next question here. I think this might be similar to a question we've already answered, but we'll give it a go anyway. Given the stated TDPs of the Zen 2 chips, why does it seem like so many of the X570 motherboards look massively overbuilt from the VRM perspective? Almost all the ones I saw showcased at Computex look to be boards that will start for around $200, and we're not going to get B550 until next year. Something seems off. Well, I wouldn't say anything seems off to me. It seems pretty good. We've sort of talked about why the boards... Well, actually, we haven't talked about that. We've talked about people thinking that the CPUs are power hungry because of the big beefy VRMs, which aren't necessarily necessary. Obviously, people are wanting to build in headroom because they're all expecting a 16-core part at some point. It's definitely happening at some point. We just don't know whether it's next month, later in the year, early next year, whatever the case may be. It's a really good sign. So something's definitely not off. It's the complete opposite to something being off. It's a sign that people are taking AMD seriously, namely motherboard vendors. The motherboard vendors that we spoke to said that they're now seeing their AMD boards heavily outselling their Intel boards, which I was shocked by.
Yeah.
I heard one or two people say that to us, so hopefully that information's... Well, I don't really care if it's correct or not, but it's a sign that Ryzen's getting good traction. We know that for current sales, Ryzen is selling well. So that being the case, they're willing to invest more into the boards, make the boards better, because they're expecting to sell large volumes of them. So, yeah, that's certainly good news. That's certainly good news for AMD. Got anything to add to that?
No, not really. And I mean, making a massively overbuilt VRM is only going to mean better VRM performance. It'll run cooler. So even if it ends up being completely unnecessary for the chips that are actually on this platform, you just end up getting better performance. And potentially, if you wanted to do a massive 16-core, all-core overclock, that the board is going to be capable and not running close to the limits of what that board can do, but still has headroom for thermals and all that sort of thing, so the board runs well. Yeah,
absolutely. It's great to see so many high-quality X570 boards, because you look at the B450 boards, off the top of my head, without if there's been any newer ones released, when I first did my roundup, it was like MSI had the Tomahawk and the Carbon Pro. Their Mortar M-ATX board was pretty good, but other than that, the other board makers kind of dropped the ball. Their VRM and cooling was pretty crap. The X470 range was pretty crap as well. Like the flagship boards from Gigabyte and Asus were good, but beyond that, the cheaper boards weren't very good. You'd just get B450 instead. So you really had to be careful about which board you bought, especially if you wanted to overclock or upgrade CPUs down the track. Whereas with X570, from what I've seen, and that's sort of what you're commenting, they all look to be like the cheapest boards are around $200, but they're all good. There's no corner-cutting, crappy boards. Like, they all seem really, really good. Gigabyte's range looks amazing. MSI had some great boards. We didn't get to look at the Asus boards in too much detail in terms of the VRM design. I think they're still going with their twin phase deal, which we're not particularly sold on one way or the other. But none of their boards are bad, that's for sure. They're all really good boards, and they're going to handle the 16-core part if and when that comes out. In the Ryzen 3000 series anyway. So that's that one. Okay, so that concludes part one of this month's Q&A that you're probably watching in the next month by the time we edit this, and we'll probably be on a plane while you guys are watching this, so if we're not replying to any or addressing any of the comments in the comment section, it's probably because we're on the 10-hour flight back to Melbourne. Anyway, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, share. Sharing a thing.
I think
we still share.
We should encourage people to share. I'm not sure people actually do it.
Okay, guys, please share. We need help.
Share it to your mum.
Yeah, she might enjoy it. I don't know. Is she into tech stuff? Anyway, that is definitely going to do it for this one. You can also support us on Patreon if you want to do that. But anyway, thanks for all the great questions, and hopefully we can get part 2 edited before we have to leave. So, I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.